I think consciousness is some sort of fundamental aspect of the universe. Maybe there are others, maybe, but I don't think time and space, I suspect, just exist within consciousness. So I think that consciousness is not an epiphenomenal byproduct of computation. So I don't think that LLMs or AI will ever be conscious. Maybe conceptually in the future, a different concept of AI could be, but nothing that I'm currently aware of that I think is even moving in the direction of consciousness. So I treat it as fundamental. And I'm not a solipsist, so I do think that there are other consciousnesses and that we're sharing some sort of reality. So in a sense, we could perceive it almost like a shared dream, but it's that, there's still obviously objective things all around us that in our day-to-day life, these are real, the physical stuff is real, but ultimately the important point to keep in mind is that the mind, the subjective experience and the mind are upstream of the material world and not downstream.
I definitely see consciousness as primordial, but I think that, I don't deny the physicality at all. I don't think it's a dream. I think it's that consciousness can only present as what it already is within itself. So consciousness must have the potential for physicality already within itself. So in other words, the physical reality is just an expression of consciousness.
I'm much more in the camp, in Sophie's camp, matter is derivative of mind, not equally fundamental. So if we get into quantum physics, for example, obviously there's no agreement on what it's saying. There's just these interpretations. But in my view, it's kind of straightforward, like the double slit experiment and the observer effect. It's showing you that the physical stuff, it doesn't really exist other than a probability field until it's interacting with the conscious mind. So I don't think it's equally fundamental. I think consciousness is primary, I guess.
That makes sense to me too. And I don't know if you're familiar with Donald Hoffman.
Sure. Yes.
And he talks about a lot of the fundamental ideas of Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, which would say that matter really just sort of becomes unmeasurable at 10 to the minus 33 or 35 centimeters for Planck time and Planck scales, right? And so it can't be fundamental because whatever it is we're calling matter ceases to be that thing at that level.
I'm not sure if you're familiar with OR theory, which Stuart Hameroff and Sir Roger Penrose. So Roger Penrose, I was watching a debate with him, and he's a mathematician. He believes that mathematics exist independent of the human mind. They're just we don't invent math; we discover what math is. I'm really agnostic on that subject. I think it's possible, but it's also possible that we're creating math with our own human mind as we go along, and it happens to help us unmap sort of this. And again, another metaphor, but the simulated reality that we're in, if you want to look at it that way, I think we're active participants in it. It's not so mathematics being the fundamental reality. I don't, or even numbers or anything like that. I don't personally think so. I think that comes out of consciousness again, morality, because the physicalists and the materialists, I don't think they're if they were right by their own philosophy, there is no such thing as morality or free will or anything like that, which then that obviously has huge political implications on everything and how we should be living our lives, etc. So at least from an idealist perspective, we still have room on the table for free will, and the human experience is such that I don't know how you would really live without believing that you have some degree of free will.
Right. I'm more of a compatibilist on that, so I kind of feel there's a degree of freedom. Right. There has to be, otherwise it doesn't make sense to really say anything or do anything. So even if you might say, well, it's just a useful fiction, okay, fine, then it's a useful fiction. It's useful, so it's real enough. Then you've just defined reality as something very useful.
I think that consciousness is something that it wants continuity. It wants to continue, and so when we make choices, I think the best way to do that is to determine or try to predict the outcome. And if the outcome is destructive and interrupts continuity, is that how you say it? Then we tend to not make that choice, except for the people that do. And I think it has to do with their level of awareness or whatever, you know? I don't see consciousness as something that's perfect. It's evolving, it's learning, and you know, I'm pretty sure that consciousness has a shadow side and is not at all times aware of everything yet. You know, once, you know, we're going through stages as we evolve. And like we just said, there are levels of consciousness. And so I don't think that we can look at consciousness as this sky daddy that's perfect. And if he's so perfect, why is he creating evil? Well, it's because of unconsciousness. And until the conscious is made conscious, you're going to repeat mistakes and things that we perceive as evil.
Consciousness
So
overall may have a totally disassociated goal than what we may be aware of. Maybe it's just beyond our comprehension. What do you think?
Oh, I got 3 things I want to say, like based on what you guys just said. So I'll try to be concise about this. Backing up for a moment to like Nazi Germany, for example, and Hitler. I think that I could make a very objective case from like, you know, Hitler's been well studied. I think that he had a personality disorder and that he was a malignant narcissist, which is a type of mental condition that results from, you know, his upbringing combined with other factors. So I don't think that he was meta-conscious at all. And neither do I think that most Nazis. I think his following and his base, they were all running on like instinct mode, like a lower animal than someone who's actually meta-conscious. So I think that meta-consciousness is probably like the highest on that, like in terms of evolution as like a you know, a graph, like the most evolved people are those of us with meta-consciousness. So I think it's sort of up to us, those like philosophers and scientists and thinkers who are meta-conscious, to try to package this as a coherent ideology for people. Because like when people are running on autopilot, when they're asleep, as Gurdjieff said, like they're on autopilot mode, and some malignant narcissist leader comes along and rounds them all up. They're capable of horrible atrocities, right? So I think that evolution is forced. We're not in a separate world anymore. The world is a round, interconnected ball. What we need, and human beings have evolved to be religious or teleologically driven. So what we need is a more coherent philosophy that isn't nihilistic, that isn't materialistic, or that isn't an Abrahamic religion that's based in a hard like philosophy, like idealism, which posits that we basically, for lack of a better, more precise term, have like a soul or subjectivity. And you know, Hitler is a product of his environment as well, right? And I would argue that Europe at the time that he was growing up was just toxic to begin with, the whole nation state concept and empire and all that stuff. So what we need to do is just prevent these type of narcissistic animals from getting in power in the first place. Like, I don't see how idealism actually justifies like anything that the Nazis did or any of that, and just the opposite. I think that empathy goes hand in hand with being meta-conscious. I'm not sure personally how you could be very meta-conscious and not be empathetic. So that's just a comment on you know, historical things like that. Like and what kind of like, how lucid is that mind, right? And I think there's hierarchies of consciousness. Like you know, I don't think an individual cell, or if my liver is conscious, like Michael Levin talks about, I don't think it's as egoic of a mind as I have.
Right.
So
Me too.
At our level of the mind that we have, you know, I think we have some responsibility to use it to try to like, well, or maybe we're endowed with it to begin with as part of the evolutionary process to help the whole species kind of like move along with us. You know, evolution hasn't stopped. We're still subject to it. And you know, the Hitler example is a perfect example. Is if we don't become more meta-conscious, look what we're capable of doing.
I just wanted to push back a little bit on how you said that earlier, because that could come off like, oh yeah, it's just God's will and it has a greater purpose, and that's why bad things happen. And I don't think of it like that. I think of it as, you know, it's parts of consciousness that consciousness has not made conscious to itself yet, right? And so there are going to be parts of consciousness that we see or experience as bad, And like he said, it's our responsibility to try to, I don't want to sound like some guru, but awaken people, help people become more conscious, because it takes accountability. That's all there's to it. You have to want to progress. You have to want to do better. And you can't do that if you're, not conscious enough, if you're running around like a philosophical zombie. So I agree, those of us who are more meta-conscious, it is our job to try to do that. You know what I'm saying? And that's not in a narcissistic way or saying that, oh yeah, I'm so much more better than you or whatever, because there's a difference between people who do that because they want to feel special and whatever. And then there are those of us who really have a lot of empathy and we are deeply affected by the things that we see happening, I would say, in a way that some people just aren't. And that's just how I naturally am. I try not to care sometimes because it's overwhelming, but I can't help it. And so that's my motivation for wanting to talk about these things, because I think at the end of the day, we have to realize we're all in this together.